Hello and welcome back to the channel, where once again it's time for another first impressions video in my PlayStation series, with today's game being the 5th game in the series in the form of the 2D platformer known as Rayman, the very first game in the long-running, incredibly popular series. And of course the PlayStation version came out in September of 1995 in all regions. It's worth pointing out that it also came out on the Atari Jaguar, the Sega Saturn and the PC, and it's seen releases across many other formats since that time.
One fateful day, the evil Mr. Dark steals the Great Protoon and defeats Attila the Fairy as she tries to protect it.
So the story for Rayman revolves around a magical orb known as the Great Protoon, which has kept people and nature living in harmony. But one day, Mr. Dark decides he's going to steal that because he wants it for himself. He defeats its guardian, Attila the Fairy, and then as a result, all of the Electoons that used to orbit the Great Protoon scatter, and many of them are imprisoned by all of the villains that have appeared in the Great Protoon's absence. Upon Attila's request, Rayman sets out on an adventure to ultimately defeat Mr. Dark and recover the Great Protoon.
They definitely need a hero to save them now!
So once the title screen comes around, there's no options as such. You simply get to choose whether you're going to load game if a memory card's in, start the game, and then it will give you a list of the controls before your adventure begins. So like always, I'm going to start with visuals first, and if you've never played Rayman before, then you are in for a visual treat, because it is a glorious looking 2D game. Whether we're talking about the fantastic detailed character models, all of the amazing backdrops, the amazing levels of depth that each of them have with multiple layers, the fantastic color palette, it really is that good. And the brilliant animations within the game as well. It really is a tour de force of 2D amazing quality, and it shows what the PlayStation could do in terms of its two-dimensional performance. Remember, everybody thought the Saturn was the 2D powerhouse, but there's no denying that the PlayStation could perform wonders when it came to 2D as well. In fact, the only downside with Rayman is the fact that when it comes to the performance, there are occasional little bits of slowdown here and there, but apart from that, Rayman is an absolute visual treat. So moving on to the sound effects and music next, and certainly from my time spent with the game thus far, my first impressions in this area are that it is just as strong as the game visually, because we've got some tremendous quirky slapstick style sound effects that fit the visual presentation absolutely to a T, and we've got some charming magical musical tracks as well. The game has a very good soundtrack from what I've experienced so far. I feel the audio presentation overall matches the visual presentation perfectly. So of course what I'll do is give you some samples of the music. So moving on to the gameplay next, and Rayman follows a very standard platformer style formula. Move through the levels, rescue his friends known as the Electoons, and then defeat the bosses at the end of each world before eventually going on to the final boss. and completing the game, it works absolutely fine. It's tried and tested by this point in time. In terms of the actual controls, Rayman actually controls very well. At the start of the game, he can simply just walk, jump, and crawl, but then as you progress through the game, he picks up new abilities, the ability to punch things, grab onto things. He can also ride mounts and use the action button as well to pull off a variety of different things as you progress through the game. It's actually quite entertaining, it's fun to play, and as you progress, it gives you that little bit of variety dependent on the levels as well. So it's actually quite nice, quite pleasant, and fairly varied. The only problem really is the spike in difficulty that this game has from a very early point. Once you've done the first 2 stages, it jumps in difficulty and will provide a thorough challenge to anybody, and many people will think, looking at the visual presentation, it's a kids game and only kids would want to play it. That's where you're wrong. This game will provide a massive challenge for even the most hardened of platformer fans, so I would really point that out to you if you are going to play this game for the first time now, and especially if you were a younger gamer come to this now, you may not even have the persistence to play through it, because it genuinely does provide a thorough challenge. So moving on to content and lifespan next, and Rayman is a one-player game with 20 levels spread across 5 main worlds. Once you've finished all of these, you will unlock the final level, which is of course the very last boss on the game. Now apparently it takes around about 10 hours to play through, or at least my research tells me that anyway, but you have to take into account this game's very difficult and you're probably going to die quite a lot and use a lot of continues, so it may well take even longer than that to complete. So it's definitely going to give you a thorough experience. Of course, the big question is whether you're going to persist with it, because it is quite a difficult and challenging game. So like always, that leaves me with my 2 final questions. Is Rayman a game that I'm going to come back to and play more of, and what final grade is it going to get? Now in terms of whether I'm going to play it more, yes, because Rayman's going to be a game that I play through right until the very end. But that won't be on the PlayStation, it will actually be on the Sega Saturn, and that is because it's a game that hasn't featured yet in my review series. So I will be playing it more, just not on the PlayStation. Now in terms of a final grade for its first impressions, Rayman is a good looking game. It also sounds very good, and it is quite fun and entertaining to play. The only downside really is the quite steep learning curve and the difficulty of some of the levels. So in terms of a grade, it is going to get a very healthy B, because I genuinely think it's a pretty good game based on the hour that I've played it, and the reviews that I've looked at as well do match up with that. It did score pretty well when it came out, and actually by the end of 1997 it was the very best-selling PlayStation game ever released here in the UK. Obviously that was surpassed by other games, but that's still an impressive thing nonetheless. Now of course these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and I'm always interested in hearing everybody else's opinions, as I always say. So of course, let me know your thoughts on Rayman down below, whether you had it on the PlayStation or the Saturn or the PC or even the Atari Jaguar. Let me know your thoughts, and like always, I'll be back in the near future with another first impressions video. Goodbye for now.